She's clever.
Can she speak?
We don't know yet.
She's been through a lot.
She just needs a family.
Welcome home.
I found out what happened to your new little girl.
Mom, no.
The mother butchered the whole family.
Something's not right in the house.
I've been feeling strange too. I'm sure Cathelia is as well.
And it feels like there's something else.
Hi, congratulations on a new movie. And Jeffrey, congratulations on like all of the movies forever. Good Lord, you're having a great year, aren't you?
Yeah, it's been a fun year. It's been a fun year.
Hell
So,
yeah. And
and
it's
hopefully keep going.
yeah. Well, I wanted to hear, how did the two of you come together for this project? I would love to know the origin story of the other and how the two of you united to work on this. And Paul, can I start with you on that one?
Sure. Well, as far as uniting, Jeffrey and I have been, very tight, close friends for, 20 something years now.
Cool.
We were seated next to each other at a horror convention brunch or something right after I did Hellbent, and we became fast friends. We talk almost every day, even though we don't live next to each other anymore. Um,
Oh, I love that. Oh,
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I had the other percolating in my head for a long time. It was,
okay.
yeah. And Jeffrey came to me, saying, "Oh, I think I found some, financiers for a really low budget movie." And it was a really low budget movie. So I had to kind of pull in my ideas that took place in, one location essentially.
Okay.
And that was what became the other. Ultimately, we went with a different production company, but that was the genesis on my side.
Cool. Well, and then Jeffrey, what attracted you to working on this project?
Well, I mean,
Me?
yeah,
Obviously,
well, no,
obviously,
it's
besides
true. No, it's
Paul.
true. It's absolutely no, it's absolutely true. I've always been a huge fan of Paul's work, and he's amazing writer and director. And so when he wrote the script, um, I just thought it was so well done. It's kind of a family horror film, but it's twisted through this kind of fairy tale like dark humor lens that Paul has. So there's no like there's no like one liner funny like that kind of humor in there. It's all very situational, based on kind of the awkwardness of our interactions with each other, especially when you're a young couple trying to raise a child, and the father is not as mature as maybe a father should be, and the mother more mature, and then you have this them adopting a child who can't speak, and there's some horrific strange stuff going on around her. um
Yeah.
so there was a lot of symbolism and representation there that I loved, and just you're reading it, and it's got these really great characters that you get invested in, and then it just gets crazier and crazier until the end, when it's just like as Paul loves and I love it, kind of gets really crazy at the end.
Yes.
So it was just a really well written story with great characters, and with Paul behind it, like when the first investors that I talked to kind of fell through, we found some real ones,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is hard in this town, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you know just wanted to support him making the movie that he wanted to make, and you know obviously we're gonna hopefully work on a whole bunch of shit together, because I just
Yeah.
adore the
Yes.
man.
Hell yeah. Well,
We're gonna get
Paul.
duplexes and like live next to each other and just make little crazy
Oh,
things. Yeah.
oh, oh, you guys can, together forever. But Paul, you said this
Uh,
has been an idea for a long time. I wanted to hear
yeah.
more about that and like when it first started and how it started. I'd
Mm,
love to just hear a little bit more about the history of the project in your
sure.
mind.
Yeah. Well, I I had a nightmare on my honeymoon about
Great,
being a
great, 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 great.
yeah, that's perfect. Set the tone. Um, about being a new dad with a kid who was a terror. Just something, feeling like I have to nurture this this offspring, this child, and lead it through life, and it's just a horrible, horrible, horrible person. Um, it's sort of, one of the bad seed kind of situations,
Oh
except even
yeah.
worse
The
because it
other
was,
child type stuff. Oh, my
right,
worst
yeah,
nightmare.
yeah, it's, except with a lot of more gore and biting. Um, so that's it. It stuck with me. I mean, obviously, the location and timing for the nightmare stuck with me. I thought that was really amusing, and it was so visceral in my dream that I kept that, the kernels of the moments there. The struggle of that young of me as a young dad trying to wrestle with this, child. Um, and but I never really knew what to do with it. Uh, until Jeff, it just kind of went into the drawers for almost 20 years, maybe more. Until Jeffrey said, "Hey, I've got, at the time it was $200,000." And I was like, well, I think I know how to make a movie like that, but it's got to be in like one room. Um, so this was the script. This was the idea where I'm like, well, it's a family story. It takes place in a family house. I can keep it contained.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
that's
Well,
where it came from. Yeah,
hell yeah. I love that.
yeah,
I'm like a chronic nightmare haver, so I love the idea of using your nightmares as inspiration because it's like, well, if my brain's gonna feed it
absolutely.
to me, I might as well use it. Like use the nightmare for good, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, and you feel it. I mean, nightmares are so personal. Even if, everyone has the same
Yeah.
nightmare, it's still, you can tap into the emotional connection to a nightmare in a way that I think is really potent.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. I wrote this script in a really limited amount of time. Um, and
Um,
so that kind of feeling in me, that connection to it really drove it.
was it
And
weird
also
bringing it to life? Was it weird bringing your nightmare? Like I know it wasn't obviously the exact nightmare, but like
no, of course not.
obviously, but
Yeah.
like was it kind of weird seeing it finally come to life? Like that's got to be such an interesting experience, like this idea living in your
Yeah.
head for so long coming to life in front of you.
Well, it transformed so quickly.
Yeah.
So I mean, once I started putting other characters in it, and I was like, oh, how do I get this to 90 minutes? This one moment, which is still in the film. It
Cool.
was a good seed. But then once I knew that I had to create a really unhinged story, because we were going to, at the time, have such a low budget, that I'm like, well, it's got to be audacious, otherwise no one's going to talk about it. So,
Yeah.
I was just like, well, what can I heap on to this, kernel of an idea to just go wacko with it?
Yeah.
And at that
Cool.
point, it just becomes its own. It becomes its own child, you
Hell
know.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and I was curious because you're tackling adoption, which I know adoption is like
Mhm.
a really interesting subject for a lot of reasons. It's very complicated, and like the adoption
Yeah,
industry is, I hate that it's even called an industry, but it gets
it
very
is.
weird.
Yeah.
And you're also dealing with a white couple adopting a black girl in this film. And I was curious what it
Yeah.
was like navigating these topics. It's a horror movie, but you're navigating some very real world kind of discussions and dynamics about adoption and white families adopting black kids and
Yeah.
what that means. So I was curious what it was like kind of navigating that story and thinking about that in casting. And was that always your intention or did it
hmm
come up in casting? Okay.
it was fairly early on my intention.
Okay.
Um, when I was writing the script, or even before I was writing the script, I was, toying with the idea for ages.
Yeah.
I had, several different little stabs at the concept, and I, when visualizing it early on, I'm like, I need a way to constantly remind the audience that these are not the biological parents.
Hmm.
To keep that kind of separation. Um, and once you do that, I mean, that opens up a whole world. You can't avoid it. It's like, okay, so now we're talking about a wide variety of other subjects that wasn't my original intent, but now I have to embrace this. Um,
Cool.
and that was really exciting to me, honestly, because that gave the story, um, a bunch of other levels to it. I come from a very mixed family. I have, African American nieces, and uh, a wide variety of races in my family. So having that kind of mixture, even though I have not, it's a different situation. They're all biological. Um, I am cognizant talking to my siblings, about what the challenges are.
Yeah.
And then of course, I have Jeffrey here, who's always there as sort of, a sounding board for, well, this has been my experience, or maybe you throw out a line like this, to really hammer that idea home.
Cool.
Um, but overall, my main goal for the film was, just to be a wild ride and really fun. And then when you want to start digging, you have that stuff layered in. I always say I write for the second viewing. The
Oh,
first one
hell
is just,
yeah.
oh, it's fun. But then when you go back through, you know it's coming. So then you're like, oh, I see how this is, being woven
Cool.
through. At least that's my goal. That's my goal.
Jeffrey, were you going to say something before about the script and all that
No, I
stuff?
was going to say that was one of the things that, that we definitely had conversations about it because um, it is going to create, some conversations out there, and
Yeah.
in this hypersensitive time,
Already has.
yeah.
Already has.
But in this hypersensitive time, Paul was even at one point was like, should I keep this, or should I just make it a white child so we don't even have, and I said, no, absolutely keep it because
Yeah.
this is a topic that's, again,
Hmm.
this isn't what the movie's about, but this is a reality that's out there. Children of color are harder to adopt than other
Yeah.
Hmm.
people. And in this movie, we're dealing with an African American child who literally has no voice, who is trying to, deal with this trauma, this situation that's coming on around her family. And it's
Yeah.
called The Other
Hmm.
because so many of us have been othered for so many different
Yeah.
reasons. So I said, don't shy away from it because, people are going to read into it what they're going to read into it. But, it's about the intention of the story. And, the thing that I love that Paul hung on to from his nightmare, was for me the idea that, he obviously this is not like a demon seed kind of movie, but
Yeah.
the kind of idea of being kind of a hapless, unprepared father, and Cathalia, our lead, kind of helping him grow throughout the course of the story to become a father was like something that
Hmm.
Paul kept from his nightmare, but he is
Yeah.
just but outgrew the nightmarish part of it.
Yeah.
So,
Cool.
um, but
Yeah. The
yeah,
father is doggedly trying to rise to the level of being a good dad,
Yeah.
over all these, hurdles and, you know, uh, challenges where, as the mother is a little more, it's like, I'm going to cut my losses,
Yeah.
you know?
yeah,
So,
Well, this is like pivoting a little, but you both are like kind of, I know this might sound like hyperbolic, but to me, it's not like pillars of queer horror, at least to me, in terms of Hellbent and Final Destination. And obviously, this is not a queer film, but the two of you coming together, it's inherently queer just to me as a queer person and a queer filmmaker. And it means a lot to me to see you guys coming together to make something like this. And I am curious, it's Pride, and what is it, how does
mhm.
it feel just to keep making these horror movies and being part of the horror community as a queer person? And why it's so important to you? And Paul, I'd love to start with you if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah. I think that there are aspects of this film that are queer coded, so it's not, I wouldn't dispose. Well, it's a freaking horror movie, so of course there's going to be queer
Yeah,
coding,
it's horror, it's
right?
queer. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, exactly. Um, as I am getting older, the stories that I am, really starting to gravitate right now are more like Hellbent, explicitly queer, because especially in our current times, I feel that, that kind of explicit, conversation needs to be available, you know?
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm certainly feeling feisty politically. So, I probably get smaller budgets, but I think that for me, it's like art is such a potentially powerful voice. as for as inspiring and guiding, and or just being there so that people don't feel lonely, I guess. And for me,
Yeah.
I have a lot to say now. I'm not just trying to make a career in Hollywood. It's like I've reached a point where it's like, okay, guys, we need to talk about these things,
That's
you know.
awesome. I love that.
So, uh,
I love that. And like,
I
who
hope,
would have thought, like, Hellbent, as like a slasher, a
right.
gay slasher would have such an impact? I mean, so many people have written about it for Dread Central. Like, it's such an iconic film, and it's got to be amazing as a filmmaker just to be like, what the hell? That's so cool that this like little
I
slasher kind of has had such an impact on the
yes.
world. Like, it's got to be so fucking cool. Pardon me, but
Oh,
like, that's
it
awesome.
is. It really is. And I love hearing that. Sometimes I'm not aware of it, but I do get, people writing to me occasionally. It's like, hey, I was, 14 in Wisconsin and I saw this movie and I just wanted to, I'm 35 now and I've got, a child and I just want you to know how much it meant to me. And it's like, that's very gratifying.
That's cool as
It's not really
hell.
what I set out to do at that time, but I
Yeah,
love it that it's got a life.
that's cool as hell.
Um, and it wasn't like any of the queer films I was seeing at the time. It was at that time, it was all, falling in love with the prostitute and, tackling my drug addiction and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And I was
And
like, well,
Jeffrey, I know you've probably been asked this question like a million times about, your influence and everything, but I mean just like
mm,
you also support so many indie horror voices too, like and I love that about you and your continued work. So I'm just curious like about your just thoughts about that and I know
Well,
again you've been
it's
asked a
funny
million
because,
times, but yeah.
Hellbent was one of the first, you know, queer horror films that I saw and I fell in love with it. Like, before I even knew Paul. Like, so when I got to meet him, I geeked out on him. Unfortunately, I couldn't say I was 15 when I saw it. I was much older, but just super condensed. Like when I was growing up, there was nothing on TV. Like
Yeah.
if a soap opera introduced a gay character, like the moral majority was like boycotting, and it was like all over the news. And if the only time I found out somebody was gay was when they died of AIDS, like, because everybody was in the closet and people really
yeah,
didn't, people started getting outed in the 90s. So I didn't get to grow up with any, like I had to search out, like, when
Yeah.
Clive Barker came out, was out, I was like, oh my God. And I found out about the Oscar Wilde bookstore and found, movies and things on my own. But,
Yeah.
living out in rural America, it's like you're so desperate for like anything positive. Um, so even so to see a horror film where the characters were gay, but it wasn't about them being, gay, but
Yeah.
they felt very authentic and real. And when the poor kid gets killed in the alleyway, that still just is gut wrenching to me because I love that character, so much. But it's been hard. It's been hard. It's been hard navigating this industry because I mean, I've been
mm,
trying to get just for realism with Final Destination. It's like, that movie takes place in New York, that they take place in major cities, and it's been a fight for me to even get racial representation into the franchise, and not because anybody's like arguing against it. It's just never been on anybody's radar until the last maybe decade,
mhm.
to have it. So, but I was like pushing for it way before, you know, since the beginning of my career. And
Yeah.
so I've had so many characters like de-gayed, um, and even characters where they didn't do anything gay. It was just they were gay. That was just part of who they were.
Yeah.
So it is exciting to see how well it's been exciting to see how far we've come, and thank God at least our younger generation can cut through all the noise and the clutter and that bigotry out there and find like support and voices. But like Paul said, I've got a lot to say too, because we are just really, really, as a society, are getting to a place where the voices of intolerance for everything is getting very strong and gaining political capital and really trying to like keep us divided. Um, so it's very, I don't worry for myself. I've heard everything as a person of color and as a gay person. I've heard everything that could be thrown at me. But I do worry about, the younger generation who are, I know the psychological damage that's happened to, our community by kids being disowned and thrown out on the
Hmm.
street or forced into conversion therapy. And I've seen the wreckage, and the lifelong trauma that a lot of my adult gay friends have. And I
Yeah.
know, I just don't want any other young people to suffer through that or think that they're alone. So that's why I've always been out. And I think it's, I don't want to speak for Paul, but I think, being out at the beginning of our careers at a time when it wasn't accepted definitely did not help our careers.
Hmm.
If anything, it hurt our careers. Um,
Yeah. No one would meet with me after Hellbent. No producers, no studios, no anything. My agent could not set me up with a single meeting.
yeah,
So
so
Well, that's why
times
I'm so
yeah,
have,
glad y'all are working together now. I mean, like, it's just
yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah.
do you see? But like, I know it's 2025 and Hellbent came out in 2004.
Yeah, I think officially 2005.
Five,
It
pardon
had
me.
its premiere like frame line and all that in 2004.
But just
But
like
yeah,
to see y'all still making movies and saying like we're still fucking here, it just means
yeah.
so much, especially like I'm a queer filmmaker and just to kind
Hmm.
of like not spit in the face necessarily, but a little bit, just be like, we're still gonna make movies and they're gonna be great and we're gonna keep
Yeah,
doing it. And it's just like
yeah,
this kind of
yeah.
movie the other just brings hope of like, yeah, we can still make movies and they don't have to be queer, but they are. And it's I don't know, it's just badass and it makes me really excited for the future of horror and also just to have y'all still in the community. It brings me joy.
Okay.
yeah, we're not going
Me
anywhere.
too.
Yeah,
We're not.
Paul and I joke we'll be like, you know, changing each other's catheters, in,
Oh,
in a nursing home making horror movies,
I know
Yeah.
storyboarding while you're giving him
storyboarding
medicine.
how to murder those darn kids.
Yeah.
Yay! Are you guys working on something else together soon? Anything else coming up from y'all that you can tease besides the
Uh,
other?
for for Jeffrey, absolutely. I mean, he's a lot further along than I am. Let's say that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, I've got a couple of projects that I'm packaging right now. One is actually, it's a universal horror story, but it has a gay lead in it.
Sick.
Um, and it
Hmm.
really and it but it really does hit. I'm not trying to play down the gayness of it, but it really hits on what's going on right now in
Mm.
our in our world and deals with it in a very raw, real way. It's probably the darkest thing I've ever written. So we're packaging
Ooh.
that right now, and aside from the other, I have another project called New Fear's Eve that we're gonna be announcing a
Yeah,
distributor for.
I know those guys. We've
Oh,
watched
Eric and
film festivals
PJ,
together with our
yeah,
movies, so that's so
they're
cool.
they're amazing. And yeah, I've got a bunch of stuff. It's always like until the green light
Yeah.
happens,
Yeah.
you don't know if it's gonna happen. But I have a lot of good stuff percolating, and I know Paul's working on some stuff, and anytime I can work with him, I'm obviously gonna do it. So
Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
thank you both so much for chatting with me about the other. It's so cool to talk to the two of you and see how this movie came to life. And yeah, I really appreciate your time.
of
Oh, well,
course.
thank you so much. It's a
Thank
joy.
you.
Yeah.